Today marks the end of a nightmare for 20 Israeli men who for more than 2 years were held captive by Hamas and their allies in Gaza. After 738 harrowing days, they were finally reunited with their loved ones who, since October 7th of 2023, had fought tirelessly to bring them home. In exchange for their release, Israel has freed nearly 2,000 Palestinians from its prisons. It's a day of joy for Israelis and Palestinians, but one of deep uncertainty as well. The region is at a crossroads, and what happens next is bound to shape their inextricably intertwined destiny. I'm Nicole Fröhlich in Berlin, and this is The Day.
It's now and it's happening. Our 20 hostages that are alive in Israel.
That it's finally happening, that what we've been fighting for over 2 years, finally our hostages are coming home.
I can't describe my feelings. I'm with my people. I'm very happy.
We were waiting for a year and a half for the moment of our release, and it came, thank God.
It's an indescribable feeling, sadness and pain for the high price that was paid for our freedom and the freedom of our homeland. We're ashamed of the blood that was spilled.
Also on the day, Donald Trump travels to the Middle East to mark the occasion, urging the Israeli government secure a permanent end to the conflict.
So Israel, with our help, has won all that they can by force of arms. You've won. I mean, you've won. Now it's time to translate these victories against terrorists on the battlefield into the ultimate prize of peace and prosperity for the entire Middle East.
Welcome to The Day. The war in Gaza is over, at least according to U.S. President Donald Trump. After brokering a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, he traveled to the Middle East to hail the breakthrough as a golden opportunity for lasting peace. But many questions about how to actually get there remain. Those were on the agenda at a summit in the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, where world leaders met to discuss the path forward, notably absent representatives of the warring parties. Well, before traveling to Egypt, Donald Trump addressed the Israeli parliament and told lawmakers that the time for peace was now.
Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together.
Let's now talk to Sarah Yerkes. She's a Middle East and U.S. foreign policy analyst with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. That's a global affairs think tank. Welcome back to DW, Sarah. Now, do you share U.S. President Donald Trump's belief that we are, in fact, at the start of a lasting peace in the Middle East?
Unfortunately, no. I think this is just one first step, a very important first step. To see the hostages returned, to see the prisoners released is a big achievement, but there's still so much more that needs to be done. None of this has the details hammered out. Hamas and Israel are not at the table in Sharm el-Sheikh, and there's so many details, including whether or not Hamas will agree to disarm, which is one of the crucial pieces of this that have yet to be decided.
Let's look at that aspect, because it is really one of the key elements that need to be determined when we look at the way forward. What would have to happen for Hamas to disarm?
It's the million-dollar question. You know, Hamas so far in previous conflicts has failed to agree to this. It's something that we've not seen any signs so far that they will be willing to do. We do right now have the ball in their court, so to say, that, you know, they have the power. And, you know, this is a phased agreement where there are many, many opportunities for both Israel and Hamas to say the other side has violated the agreement. They haven't done X, they haven't done Y. And so I think for Hamas, they have every incentive to want to hold on to their arms just in case this does not continue to go forward, in case this goes south.
We actually saw the Israeli defense minister, I believe it was already today, saying that Hamas was not complying with their part of the deal by not handing over immediately all the deceased hostages in Gaza. Do you believe the prime minister and his cabinet when they say they are committed to this peace?
I do think they are committed to the peace in Gaza, but what we have not been talking about, I think what everyone is sort of forgetting, is the West Bank. And I think if you're Netanyahu, this is a major win for you. You can say, look, we ended the conflict in Gaza. This is over. And in the meantime, don't look at what I'm doing over here, which is annexing large portions of the West Bank. And so even when we're talking about a potential Palestinian state, potentially, having a major move forward and recognizing a Palestinian state, we're really only talking about Gaza. And so I think for Netanyahu, what he cares about is the West Bank anyway. And I think he's able right now to kind of confuse everyone or sort of distract everyone by making it look like he's a peacemaker, when in reality, he's moving forward with everything he's been doing in the West Bank for years.
Where does the U.S. government stand on the issue of the West Bank and the settlements there?
This government, the Trump administration, is very much on Netanyahu's side. They are willing to let Netanyahu kind of do whatever he wants. And if we have to think about, what is Donald Trump's motivation, it's getting a Nobel Peace Prize. He says the conflict in the Middle East is over. That's not true. He says this is his plan. He's the only one who's, really done anything to move this forward. Again, that's not true. And so for him, once this deal is signed today in Sharm el-Sheikh, for Trump, it's done. It's a done deal. It's over. He has achieved peace in the Middle East and he can move on. And I don't think he is paying much attention to what Netanyahu is doing in the West Bank, nor does he really care to involve himself there. He supports Netanyahu, and he has long said that he believes that Netanyahu has the right to annex the West Bank.
Where does that leave the prospect of a two-state solution? We've seen many countries in recent weeks and months recognize Palestinian statehoods. At the same time, a two-state solution has looked increasingly unlikely. Where does it stand today that we're seeing Donald Trump take credit, essentially, for making peace in the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, Trump has not recognized a Palestinian state. And so I think we're in this weird position right now where, as you said, at the one hand, we're probably the closest we've been to global recognition of a Palestinian state. And on the other hand, the furthest away from where we've been to have Palestinian sovereignty over the West Bank. And so you have this big divide between the West Bank and Gaza that's happening right now, that's playing out. And at the same time, all the details about who actually governs Gaza, we don't know what that looks like yet. This idea of an international force that would help provide stabilization. We don't know which countries would actually make up that international force. So there's all these broad strokes of what could potentially be a future. These are the same broad strokes we've known about for decades. They haven't been implemented. The hard work has not yet started. Yet I think the United States, who really needs to be involved very intimately for a deal to be standing long term, as well as the Arab states who also need to be involved and bought in, they need to also be on top of this and making sure that these details are hammered out. And I think Trump is going to go home, and kind of move on to the next conflict that he wants to solve.
All of that said, and based on today's developments, everything that we've seen, everything that's happened today, what we've heard, what is your best assessment of Gaza's future? Briefly, if you can, because we're running out of time.
Sure. I think this is a great day for Gaza. The idea that aid can start flowing again. There's a lot of people committed to reconstruction. So I am optimistic that in the long run, Gaza will return to a habitable place, to a place where people can call it home and can be happy and thriving. But it's going to take a lot of time to get there.
That was Middle East analyst Sarah Yerkes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Earlier today, the militant group Hamas released the 20 surviving hostages who'd been held in captivity for over 2 years. After being handed over to the Red Cross, they were transferred to hospitals for medical assessment. These images show Eitan Moore and Guy Gilboa Dalal being reunited with their families. We can speak now to Mairav Zonszein, a senior analyst on Israel for the International Crisis Group. Mairav, welcome back to the day. All the living hostages are now back at home. What does this day mean for Israel?
It's good to be with you. It's very hard to convey just how emotional a day it is. It's really quite something that within days of Trump announcing the end of the war, you've seen people coming back on their feet, people I wasn't sure that we would ever see come out alive, to be honest. But it should be said that, this is a very emotional and difficult day because there's still a very long road ahead. There's a lot of uncertainty. And while in Israel, there's a lot of celebrations, in Gaza, people are just picking up the pieces of their lives. There's prisoners being released from Israeli prisons. There's still thousands of Palestinians in Israeli prisons. There's just so much that is still needing to be addressed that, today is really quite something, but it's hard not to think about all of the other pain, tragedy, and work that still needs to be done.
You mentioned it there. Donald Trump says the war in Gaza is over. Is that how the Israeli government views the situation?
It was also quite something today to hear Trump say that in the Knesset. It's not something that you're going to hear Netanyahu say. It's not something that Smotrich, the finance minister and de facto governor of the West Bank, is going to say. You even had the defense minister today in a tweet trying to use the pretext of the fact that Hamas has not yet returned all the deceased hostages, saying that that would be a breach of the agreement, even though everybody understands that it will take a much longer time to return the deceased hostages. So you already have this kind of effort to undermine the deal on the first day of its implementation, really. So it was very important that Trump said that there is an end to the war, and I really, really hope that he remains committed to that.
Mm-hmm. Hamas today issued a communique vowing to continue its fight against Israel. What does that tell us about Israel achieving its main goal in the war, namely eradicating Hamas?
Well, if you don't even need to ask Hamas, you can speak to certain Israeli security officials who will tell you that Hamas cannot be eradicated in the way that Netanyahu has spoken about it, that Hamas, is a political movement, an armed movement. It's not just a terror group. It's part of Palestinian politics and society. And like your previous guest mentioned, there will have to be a change in the way people understand how to integrate Palestinians in general and Hamas specifically if they want to have a practical resolution. So I think Israel's goals from the very beginning of this war of completely eradicating Hamas were not reasonable. I don't think anyone thought that they would achieve that. And I think that a very long time ago, they did achieve the dismantling of Hamas as an army, as a threat to Israel. And so a very long time ago already, we could have seen the agreement that we saw today.
Is there a sense that Israel is any safer today than it was the day before the October 7th attacks of 2023?
I mean, look, that's a difficult question. I think that Israel took apart a lot of the military capabilities, not just of Hamas, but of Hezbollah in Lebanon and other proxies, and of course in its war on Iran. So it has taken down a lot of the threats that were very, very serious against it, but it hasn't been able to translate most or all of those strategic military achievements into diplomatic ones. And if you ask many Israelis, they'll tell you that their sense of security may not be as good as you would think, considering how strong Israel's military is and how much damage it has done. There is still a sense, I mean, for me personally, after what Israel has done to the Palestinians in Gaza, I certainly don't feel safer knowing that there are now thousands and thousands of children who have been maimed and orphaned. I can't see how that's going to bring Israeli security in the long term. But I do think that if Trump continues to push, and if maybe there would be a leadership that was more responsible in Israel, then you could see those military achievements translated into diplomatic solutions.
In a recent op-ed in the New York Times, you wrote that Israel cannot go on winning like this. What do you consider to be the key to sustained peace for Israelis and Palestinians?
I mean, it connects to what I was just talking about, that, Israel, everybody understands that it has an amazing ability of intelligence, of penetrating the enemy, of, all of the things that we've seen it do in Lebanon, in Iran, and in other places. But without a political horizon, and certainly without dealing with the Palestinian issue specifically at home, Israelis will not actually see any kind of real victory, any kind of security long term. And, this ceasefire had to happen, I think, because Israelis are realizing just how much damage they have done also to their image and their legitimacy in the world. So they're going to have to really work hard on figuring out how to elect a leadership that is going to take them into a very different approach, because the approach that we've seen, while showing a lot of military strength, has not been able to actually provide, I think, middle to long-term security.
Yeah, I don't want to let you go before asking you about the Prime Minister, because many analysts have tied Netanyahu's political survival to the war continuing. Where does he stand now in the eyes of the Israeli public?
I mean, I think some of us might have seen when, Witkoff and Jared Kushner spoke in the square in Tel Aviv, that when he mentioned Netanyahu, he was booed by the crowd. The polls show since October 7th, Netanyahu is not popular. He has not regained popularity. People don't like him. But the issue goes far deeper than that. And there is no viable opposition in Israel. There's no political vision that provides an alternative. So it's very hard to see how he would be reelected, but it's also hard to see how anybody else would be elected and get a majority coalition. It's still too early to tell. We'll have to see. But Netanyahu is very, very resilient. So even though the end of this war has been forced upon him, I wouldn't rule out the fact that he can, turn this back into some kind of victory for himself in a campaign. We have to wait and see, but he's going to try to spin this any way he can to continue to remain in power.
That's journalist and commentator Mairav Zonszein. Thank you so much for your time tonight. In exchange for Hamas freeing the Israeli hostages, almost 2,000 Palestinians have been released from Israeli prisons. They were greeted by large crowds in Ramallah and the occupied West Bank, where they reunited with their families. Celebrations were also held in Khan Yunis in Gaza for returning prisoners. Around 150 of those freed will be deported to Egypt. Joining me now from Jerusalem is Jamal Nusseibeh, a Palestinian-American lawyer and a member of the board of the Middle East Policy Council in Washington. He co-authored the Palestinian Armistice Plan, a document that sets out a path to permanently settling the Palestinian-Israeli conflict with significant Palestinian participation. Jamal, welcome to DW. Now, the U.S. president is calling this Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal a historic dawn for the Middle East. From a Palestinian perspective, how significant is this moment really?
Thank you very much for having me. It is a significant, very significant moment, and let's hope it is in fact a dawn. The relevance of it right now is mainly that the killing has apparently stopped in Gaza, that there is a growing surge of food and medicine and much needed aid. We've seen the release of hostages. We've seen Israeli hostages going back to their families, which was great to see. We've also seen the release of, as you noted, I think in your news earlier, the release of almost 2,000 Palestinians. I would say that unfortunately not all of them back to their families, because actually one of the most moving images I saw was of a gentleman who had been taken about a year ago and was released to discover only that his family had been killed in a bombing, his wife and kids, a couple of weeks ago. So it is basically a moment which is full of hope, but it's also a moment of, I think, of realization and a lot of sadness on the Palestinian side. Also a realization of how enormous the task is ahead of us. And at the same time as we watch this, we see this in Gaza. We are also living it in the West Bank, obviously. And in the West Bank, we still have daily violence and military and settler attacks. And that means that although the dawn is seeable, we don't actually see where it's going. And that's why we believe, and that's why we proposed a more structured way out of this, which we can talk about.
Let's talk about it. What would a more structured approach need to look like to actually turn the ceasefire into lasting peace?
So the first thing you need to do is realize that the parties to this conflict are not Hamas and Israel, but the Palestinians in Israel. And therefore, any agreement to move beyond the conflict to ensure it doesn't happen again needs to be between all of the Palestinians in Israel. And that is not something which the current Trump plan includes. It may do in the future. In our view, meaning the authors of this plan, who are all Palestinian experts from different parts of the world, some from the US, some from Palestine, Gaza, the West Bank, etc. We believe that we need to unite the Palestinians under the Palestinians' legitimate leadership, which is the PLO. The PLO needs to enter into an agreement with Israel for a transitional period during which there is a renunciation of violence by everybody. And in the meantime, we need to have a political context which allows both the Palestinians and the Israelis to reconstruct and reform, also the Palestinians, but also the Israelis, and for us to be able to rebuild Gaza, but also to focus on the West Bank. And this, for this, we want to start with the state and not end with the state. So we call for the use of the state, the 1967 borders, as a starting point within which we can begin to carry out our reform and reconstruction. And
now,
finally,
missing from your list, sorry to jump in there, but you haven't mentioned Hamas, and they are, even if you don't think this is a discussion to be had between Hamas and Israel, it's between the Israeli public and the Palestinian public, they are a key factor in the war that is being fought right now. We're in a ceasefire moment, but where do you see Hamas going in that setup that you're describing?
So in our view, Hamas needs to be included within the PLO. The PLO
is that something that would be
represented.
acceptable to the international community, to Israel even?
Well, I think that in most cases, when you are trying to make peace, and in this case, they have already signed an agreement with Hamas, so I don't believe that there is a problem with entering into some kind of a deal with Hamas. I believe that by including it within the PLO, which is something that the PLO itself and Hamas agreed to almost 2 years ago now in Beijing, by including Hamas within the PLO, Hamas agrees to the PLO political direction, which means a two-state solution. And Hamas will also agree, along with all of the Palestinian factions, which should be included under this umbrella, to an armistice. And this is the key, that by including everybody under this umbrella, you get everybody to agree to the terms of the armistice. And that's how you ensure that it doesn't happen again.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Hamas doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. How do you envision them agreeing to a two-state setup?
And again, in my understanding, Hamas already essentially has agreed to a two-state setup and the 67 lines, just as it has also agreed to, for instance, handing over its weapons to a Palestinian sovereign state. These are things that were coming up under the Trump plan. As we see, for instance, today, Hamas is now stepping back into the streets in Gaza to take control. And I even noticed that President Trump had said that they had given them a temporary green light to do this. This isn't ideal. Ideally, what we want is Palestinian police forces stepping in with the support of an international peace force under UN mandate to keep both the Palestinians and the Israelis safe. So these are elements that we believe are necessary for ensuring a transition that will lead to a permanent peace between us.
Yeah, that is the plan that you have put on the table, the one that's being discussed right now, and that is already in implementation, is of course a different one. Where do you see this plan, the Trump plan, embarking in the right direction? What are the shortcomings, and what is the best case scenario for the Palestinian people here?
Look, I mean, I hope that the best case scenario for both the Palestinians and the Israelis is a situation in which the Palestinians are able to achieve their basic rights and live finally free, and that this will ensure that also the Israelis and the Palestinians can live in safety, peace, and security for good, and that we have a nice region that is all integrated and everybody is growing together. Right now, what we have on the table is a beginning of a direction, but it is lacking a number of fundamental issues. And one of the most fundamental issues is that it's not based on Palestinian rights. It is not based on Palestinian agency. It almost had no Palestinian input. And I think that that's where it needs to start. It needs to start on the basis of a Palestinian state in the Palestinian occupied territory, which everybody has agreed is occupied, and everybody has agreed has to be the basis for the Palestinian state. And you start with that. You start with it as a legal framework. You start with it as the basis for sovereignty over this territory. And that puts an end to Israeli expansionism, which is currently heavily underway in the West Bank. And it puts an end to this fear that currently the Palestinians have, as well as the Israelis, I'm sure, of this fear of being wiped out, of being erased. And what we both need to feel, both Israelis and Palestinians, is a sense of security in being here and a sense of security while we're here. And both of those things need to be provided. The political context and the peacekeepers provide the safety and security in a physical sense, and the recognition of Palestine along the 67 lines as a starting point provides a security in a political and existential sense. And then during the 3 years, you have time with the transitional period, you have time to reform, rebuild, and work towards a permanent peace agreement, which could be 2 states, could be 1 state, could be a confederation. Leave it for the future, because right now we're not in a position to be able to discuss that rationally or in a grown-up way.
That was Jamal Nusseibeh. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your insights.
Thank you.